Hi everyone, I just wanted to go through, this is going to be part 3. I thought I covered most of this in part 1 and 2, but I had some questions and I wanted to run through them a little bit more in part 3. So, volume, intensity, exercise selection, and how we kind of manage that through the phases. So although it's a 14-week program, really weeks 1 to 12 are the main bulk. I'll go into an entire section on week 13 and 14 how I peak and taper, although we're always building into a peak to some degree. So usually, you know, we'd have 3 development blocks, so 3-week development blocks. Development block 1, which would be like a foundation block, which is early on, further away from where we want to be in week 4. Development block 4, which will be week 12. So we want to be less specific. We want to work on weaknesses. We want to work on work capacity. We want to work on building muscle. We want to work on sensitivity to training. We want to work on momentum. So again, where we finish in week 12, ideally we want to be at our strongest. So at week 1, we want to start from a place that we can build. And how I do that is by the end of development block 1, 2, 3 and 4, what we should be in is a position to move on to the next development block so we can peak in the final week of that. I say peak, but I mean be at our strongest at the final week of that, and then that should lead us into the next phase of training when we go into the final section. Okay, so kind of, I mean, I'm grossly oversimplifying it here, but let's look at this. Block 1, let's go back, will be the foundation block. Block 2 will be weeks 4 to 6, which would be 1 to 3, 4 to 6, which is I'm about to go into. Should be more things like isometrics, although we'd be a little bit more specific. Week 3, block 3, we start increasing the frequency, but reducing the main lift. So weeks 1 to 6, we might only do a main frequency day. So we might do a deadlift day, squat day, and a couple of bench days. And we tend to do most of the specific work or even the variation work for that particular lift in weeks 1 to 6. When we get to weeks 7 to 9, we start looking at potentiation work and we start splitting the volume across. So we have a primary, more specific day, so like a primary squat day, a secondary squat day, which we use as a potentiation day, primary deadlift day, and a secondary deadlift day. Again, the secondary deadlift day should potentiate the top deadlift day or support it. Weeks 10 to 12, it's going to be peak specificity. I sometimes split some things into 3. So I might do a couple of sets one day, a couple of sets another day, and a couple of sets a day after. Or we get with varying intensities, obviously, to manage recovery. A lot of the top sets here will be, I mean, this is where we want to finish on week 12, kind of at least somewhere between where we open and somewhere where we're going to get near a second attempt. And that also leaves us a couple of weeks to taper out some of that fatigue from that. Usually at this phase, you just feel absolutely flat. I always describe it as being run over by a steamroller at this phase because we've built up a lot of residual fatigue here. Yeah, so if I was grossly oversimplifying it, I'd go block 1 non-specific, block 4 hyper-specific, and then we'd phase that in between. Block 1 less frequency, block 4 more frequency, block 1 less intensity, block 4 more intensity, block 1 more specific volume, block 4 volume relevant to the intensity. So that's how I kind of would would put it all together. Okay, so foundation blocks. So this is blocks weeks 1 to 3, or development block 1. This is how I would do it. So week 1, RP6 for a triple. Week 2, RP7 for a triple, and then week 3, RP8 for a triple. Because it's very non-specific work, it would be 75% of your top set. So RP6, just saying RP6 for bench would be 100 kilos. The back off work would be 75% kilos, but the variation work would be a lot harder. It might be like a tempo pause. But I select the variation work depending on where my weakness is. So at the moment, my variation work, and I'll go into a little bit more details as we go through, would be very different depending on what we're trying to achieve from that. For instance, you still do your main lift and you work up to a top set, a treble for RP6. For squat, say, and then I do tempo pause squats at 75% of RP6. At the moment, I'm doing deficit deadlifts as back off work for the main deadlift. So I still want to keep the main deadlift in, just warming up to it, so I know what it feels like. So I'm not forgetting it. I'm not doing. Some people would, in the old school way of thinking, is totally get rid of it, and we just do deficits, and then we make the variation work a little bit easier. And I do agree with that. I still think that can work quite well. I like to have some specific work in there, even if it's one set, and the rest of the work would be deficits work. So it'd be day one, deadlift day one combined with accessory leg work, just for a rounded foundation. We do more bodybuilding work as a secondary day. So when I do deadlift work in the primary block, in the foundation or development block 1, I'll do RDLs on a second day, and super light. Again, we're trying to build into it. This is my variation work. So again, always top set, and then 5 sets down. So week 1 would be 5 sets of 4. Week 2 would be 4 sets of 4. Week 3 would be 4 sets of 3, all at 75% of top set. So as the weight goes up, the volume slightly comes down. 3 count bench. The reason I picked this is because pec weakness. My pecs just don't seem to be engaging as well. So I really wanted to really get that 3 count, because it forces you to use your pecs. Bench work. So normally I go less frequency, but with bench work I actually go more frequency weeks. I found this worked really well for me. When it's super light, nice load of frequencies, 4 times a week bench. My bench recovers quite fast, and it really helps me build that skill when I start getting a bit heavier. And actually, when I go into the later phases after week 6, I usually reduce the bench to like 3 times a week. So some secondary and tertiary work. I like the Poliquin split squats, a lot of unilateral or some type of unilateral work or leg work. Sometimes I do a Bulgarian. Incline curls. I like the stretch on the bicep tendon. It tends to protect the shoulder. RDLs and building that hinge foundation really works well for me. Okay, so when we go into block 2, we look at isometrics and variation work. So there's less complex variation work, but we do a lot of isometrics at weaker positions. So again, I'll probably stay with 3 count pause for bench. The intensity is going to go up because we're down to 2 reps, but we still keep the phasic training of RP6 week 1, RP7 week 2, and RP8 week 3. Instead of doing deficit deadlifts, I might do pause below the knee or the transition point mid shin. So depends on how the deficits are feeling. I think I'm just going to do pause below the knee with this, and that will be 80% of the doubles. So again, what I'm trying to do here is close the gap between the back off work and the top set. Ideally, when we get near comp, We're doing a lot less reps in the back off work, but we're quite close to the top set. So we're getting a little bit more exposure to heavier weights. Okay, when we sort of, after week 6, we start transitioning into more potentiation work, and still following 6, 7, 8. Velocity used a lot more. Volume on bench would be 6 reps instead of 8 reps on week 1. But the singles, we then start using about 85% back off work. We'd almost totally eliminate the variation work, or we'd move it to another day, but we'd reduce the volume on the say squat day. So I might do, instead of doing 5 sets of 4 after my top set, I'll do my top set and do 3 sets of 4 or 3 sets of 3, depending on where I am in the program. But what I might do is a couple of days beforehand or 3 days beforehand, I might do an SSB primer, super light, about 65% of 1RM, and it forces that upright position, so it is a variation work still, but I'm also using that as a primer. So when I do go into my main squat day, it's made a big difference how that feels. Primary bench, again, sets of 3 with high quality over absolute volume mass. We're looking at this point, we should have built enough of a base to start thinking about pushing that intensity up. There will be volume work with the bench. We'll either do Larson or tempo work. Last time I kept Larson in all the way through, and it really helped with pecs, and that's where I probably made my most improvement, so I'm going to do that again. Okay, so week 10 to 12, this is when a magic happens, and it's super hyper specific. We don't learn to be a better footballer by playing cricket, so we actually start doing more comp specific work. Some people will not bother, and that's fine, it seems to work for them. I like to know mentally where I'm at. I want less surprises on the day. Bench frequency, I drop down to 3 times a week, 1 volume day and 2 intensity days. On the intensity day, I'll do a top set with a back off of about 90%. On the other intensity day, I'll do 5 sets of 3, 2, and then 1 at RP 6.5, 7.5, and 8.5. So I just want exposure to 3, 2, 1 reps and see how that goes. Second, so tertiary and secondary, week 12 we finish on 8.5. So the reason I finish fairly heavy week 12 is we want to be up around about a second attempt. Then we know where we're at. We know where our openers are going to be. We've built enough confidence there as well. Also in the taper, we've then exposed ourselves, and our bodies are now conditioned to doing them heavier weights. And at this point, the volume would be at the lowest it is through the 12 weeks. The variation work, I usually replace the SSB with pause squats between 80 and 90%. So I might do 3 sets of 3 at 80%, 3 sets of 2 at, or 2 sets of 2 at, and I use this as my potentiation work at 85%. And then I usually do 1 or 2 sets of 90% with pause squats. Bench pyramid, so 3, 2, 1s, so 3 sets of 3, 2, 1, and then isometric pulls I might do at the end. That's probably the only variation work. So if I'm going to grossly oversimplify it, this is where I put it. Program evolution. So primary reps, bench frequency, variation, back off. So the back offs kind of work at about 75 to 8%. development blocks 1 and 2. Back off work would be 85 to 90% on that. Comp pauses, variation might be things like comp pauses and spotos. All I want to do there is get comfortable with, depending on how long a referee is going to give me on my chest, I want to know that it's going to be harder than what any referee is going to give me, and I want to know that I can push something half decent. I'm going to do another part on the final steps, the peak and taper. I won't do that for a few weeks because I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I've got about 3 variations of what I want to do with that, so I'll go into details when that happens.